Good afternoon. I'm Kyle O'Dowd, NACDL's Associate Executive Director for Policy. NACDL is pleased to bring you this webinar along with our partners at the United Food and Commercial Workers. UFCW's commitment to these issues is inspiring and it is an honor to work with them. NACDL has a long-standing commitment to ensuring that people are treated fairly throughout the criminal justice system and that they have opportunities when they leave that system. Our 2014 report on collateral consequences, titled Collateral Damage, was the product of extensive hearings throughout the country and established a clear blueprint for removing the obstacles that face those with an arrest or conviction. In August 2018, we convened a conference in Atlanta called Shattering the Shackles of Collateral Consequences, and a report on that conference is forthcoming this spring. And of course, NACDL has been a major participant in Second Chance Month, partnering with Justice Fellowship on this month of advocacy and public education every year since its inception. At the core of NACDL's mission is a belief that rational and humane criminal justice policies must be grounded in forgiveness. This means giving all formerly incarcerated persons a meaningful second chance to fulfill their potential. Expungement is an important and sadly underused tool for achieving this. No one knows more about forgiveness than Desmond Tutu, who chaired South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He said, "Forgiveness is truly the grace by which we enable another person to get up and get up with dignity to begin anew." We hope you enjoy this webinar about clearing the path for new beginnings.
Thank you, Kyle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angelyn Frazer-Giles, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Network for Justice. NNJ is a network of individuals and organizations focused on state-based criminal justice reform. NNJ is pleased to co-sponsor Expungement, a second chance acknowledging Second Chance Month. This afternoon, we have a panel of policy experts and those with personal experiences with the expungement process. I have to apologize that Robin Williams with UFCW is unable to be with us today. Some of you may know that Stop and Shop employees were on a strike, and that is now over, so we're very happy. But she has been busy with that and several other things associated with dealing with international issues related to unions. UFCW has held several several events around the country on clean slate, and NACDL has been partnering with UFCW to formalize those. So we are sorry she can't be here today, but hopefully someone there at UFCW is watching, and just know that they are also co-sponsors of this event. So each of our panelists will have an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their work and their journey. And then I'll ask them a few questions. We will also take questions from the audience, and you'll be able to ask those questions via email at advocacynetwork@nacdl.org. Again, advocacynetwork@nacdl.org. If you want to ask a question, you can just email it there, and I will get the question and ask it of the panel. So I'm going to start with Ms. Sharon Dietrich and have her introduce herself, and then we'll just go down the line.
Hello, my name is Sharon Dietrich. I'm with Community Legal Services in Philadelphia. I run the employment law practice at CLS, which is one of the oldest and largest legal aid programs in the country. And I've been with the Employment Law Project there for 32 years. When I started, we didn't really see people with criminal records as an employment law matter, but now it's the single most common reason people come in to CLS for employment law help, and we do expungement as kind of the foundation of our assistance for people with criminal records.
Thank you, Sharon.
So good afternoon. My name is Zane Johnson. I'm the managing attorney with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. We're one of the youngest and smallest legal aid organizations in the country, probably. So we started back in 2010, and we were founded by 3 civil rights-based attorneys who noticed an issue around criminal records and the barriers that they were creating for folks in being able to access opportunities such as employment and education and housing. And And so got started with providing expungement services, and here we are almost 10 years later, still providing expungement services to folks with criminal records in Philadelphia, but also providing information to folks, helping to empower them to take the next steps to recognize opportunities when they've had situations involving the Pennsylvania criminal justice system. So I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you.
My name is Tina Connor. I'm a resident of Philadelphia. I work as a CPS, which is a certified peer specialist, around the city of Philadelphia. I work in the field, and that is to help participants dual diagnosed that have criminal records, drug problems, and to try to show them a new perspective in the community to where they just live life on a new perspective. I, too, had a criminal record that was holding me back in life, and getting a job and getting ahead and getting a second chance. But through the Philadelphia Lawyers of Social Equity, my record was not completely expunged, but it is expunged to the limit to where I can now work and put my best foot forward in the community.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. I'm going to start with Sharon. So NACDL, I was here at NACDL when we were working on getting our membership kind of involved in the legislation that passed in Pennsylvania. So could you talk a little bit about Pennsylvania's a clean slate, because it was quite a feat, and we had a panel discussion there in Pennsylvania about the expungement process. And so I just want everyone here to kind of understand what happened with that legislation, why you put the legislation forward, and subsequently where people are in terms of getting their records expunged.
Thank you, Angelyn. I'm very happy to talk about Clean Slate because I think it's one of the more innovative things we've had as developments in criminal record sealing and expungement in recent memory, and I'm hoping that we can see it in a lot of jurisdictions in addition to Pennsylvania. As I mentioned, my program has done criminal record work for quite a long time now, and so this idea of Clean Slate has grown out of our law practice. And basically, Clean Slate means rather than filing petition after petition to try to expunge or seal records, that instead a computer query is run, and so technology automatically seals records where people are eligible to have their records sealed. We came up with this idea because we were seeing that the more records that we got expunged one by one, even though the numbers would grow exponentially, we were not beginning at all to meet the need that existed in the community for records to be expunged. So, for instance, a study just came out of the University of Michigan Law School in which they found that in Michigan, the number of people that are eligible for criminal record set-asides, they call them in Michigan, only 6.5% of the eligible people were getting their records actually set aside. And that is very similar to what is being seen in a lot of other jurisdictions. That's more the norm than the exception, I'm afraid. So the idea of Clean Slate was, okay, these records are now digitized and they exist in electronic form, and that's basically how they're going on to background checks. So what if a computer query was able to clear them out? So we worked on a campaign in Pennsylvania, and I'd be happy to talk about that campaign. But let me just say that basically what is being sealed in Pennsylvania are three things. First of all, non-convictions. You have a case against you and the case is dropped or you're found not guilty. summary convictions after 10 years, whether or not you had any subsequent criminal history, and most nonviolent misdemeanors after 10 years. All of them will be automatically sealed without petitions being filed. And so therefore, now instead of our ability to expunge or seal a couple thousand records a year, Clean Slate is anticipated in its first year to seal 31 million records, a scale that we could never hope to meet if we were continuing to do this one by one. So that will amount to about 50% of all cases in Pennsylvania will have something sealed, and 41% of all charges that exist in the databases of the state police and the courts will be automatically sealed. It goes into effect on June 28th of this year for the first time prospectively for people who are newly eligible. So, for instance, people whose cases are dropped or who meet the 10-year limit for the convictions will have their cases sealed immediately starting in June. And the state has until next June to deal with the rest of the 31 million cases. So that's what Clean Slate is, and I'll be happy to talk about the kind of extraordinary legislative campaign that got us there.
It was pretty extraordinary. We will discuss that a little bit more. Before we go on, I would like the gentleman who just joined us to introduce himself. He's very official, came in very official. If you would just say who you are and just give us a brief, very brief discussion about who you are, why you're here.
I'm Gary. I'm originally from Philadelphia. I'm one of I would say Sharon Dietrich's success stories in terms of expunging criminal records. I basically grew up in South Philadelphia without pretty much any guidance. No father in the house, just a mom, 4 brothers, 2 sisters, and I pretty much lived a reckless life up to a certain point, and I was pretty much guided by the influences in the neighborhood, the guys who were out in the street doing different things. They the people that I looked at, up to. They the people that I followed. Pushing forward a few years, I spent a lot of time, in juvenile institutions and different places throughout my young life. And then in 1984, I was charged with homicide robbery, and which is a capital punishment case. And going through that process, I was blessed to be able to get through that and get found not guilty. And I was also blessed to be able to get hired by Community Legal Service at that time. It was around 1985. And I ended up staying there for roughly about 26 years, going through different positions, basically running the program in some ways. And it helped me to grow in a lot of different ways, raise my son, sent him to college, stuff like that. Ended up retiring from there in 2011 to get a job with public transportation in Philadelphia, which is SEPTA, which is a very good job, a very hard job to get, and they gave me an opportunity. I stayed there for about 3 years. Never missed a day, never had any violations, was pretty much a model employee, and my director said, anytime you want to come back, listen, I'll take you back in a heartbeat. So the reason why I'm in D.C. now is because my wife got a job in D.C. I'm married now, about 3 years, I think, about 3 years. But
Hopefully she won't watch this. You don't know how many years you've been married.
But my wife got a opportunity in D.C. to get employment, and I transferred to the public transportation system in Washington, D.C., which I was blessed to be able to get that position with any, without a hitch, and everything fell into place. And only because I was able to go through the expungement process that any of this was able to happen. I guess I'm an exception. I feel as though I'm an exception to the rule because even though I came from some dark past, I feel as though expungement, gave me a new chance at life. I mean, I can only imagine what my life would have been without that, because I probably would have been forced to live a life of lawlessness. I would have probably been condemned to the penitentiary. I probably, wouldn't have been able to, be involved with others' lives and contribute to others' lives to the extent that I have.
Gary, I'm going to stop you there. I'd like to talk a little bit more about it in terms of you being involved in other people's lives. To what extent do you think you've been involved, or have you been involved with young people or other peers?
Yeah.
To what extent have you been involved with people's lives?
I would say across the board, because I feel like I'm living testimony.
Okay.
I mean, I'm living testimony in terms of what you can do with your life if given an opportunity, if you given the right opportunity and you take advantage of it. And I feel as though I've been blessed with these opportunities because I'm supposed to give back, and I'm supposed to educate, and I'm supposed to try to save as many people as I can save, and that's the reason why I'm here right now today, and that's my passion. That's going to be my passion until I'm gone, because I feel as though everything happens for a reason, and nothing happens for nothing. And at the end of the day, I know that I was saved for a reason. And the people that I grew up with, the people that was in my life coming up, in my younger years and throughout my history, a lot of those people didn't make it. Mm-hmm. Like those people weren't as fortunate as I was to have, the support and, given the opportunities that I've been given.
That you have. Cool.
So
that is truly a blessing. Thank you for that testimony.
Yeah.
Tina, so let me ask you, in terms of your being able to receive an expungement, you said it's been a partial expungement, not everything is expunged from your record, but you were able to gain employment, and how has that changed your life or your trajectory in terms of where you were and where you are now, that having been given that opportunity for an expungement?
Well, I just want to say, actually, everything in Philadelphia was expunged. It's another county, Bucks County, they don't have expungement as far as I know. And it was, so I never worked on the Bucks County. It was only Philadelphia City. So everything from there actually just paid off all the fines and everything, so it's completely wiped out for Philadelphia. But Gary?
Yeah, Gary.
Like Gary was saying, yes, I didn't want to
No, that's all right.
But that's what it has done for me, actually. What happened with me was, I lived a wild life at one time, and, and in and out of jail for petty crime. It was petty crime, stealing to eat. I was shoplifting, and and just thought it was a big game, and and really didn't even care about my life at the time. And at the age of 45, I was in jail, and I came out of jail, and I actually wanted to turn my life around, but I thought I was too old. You know, my list of crimes was just too much, and I just wasn't going to get anywhere. But then I started trying. I really started putting my foot forward, and I got some part-time jobs where they don't check your criminal record. And it was, you know, part-time minimum wage jobs and, you know, seasonal jobs and everything. But I wanted something more. I wanted a full-time job. So I would go to different places around the city, and they would tell me at the interview that I was top priority. They wanted me for their company, but we have to wait for your criminal background to come back. And it would come back, and then I wouldn't be able to get hired. And this went on for like a whole year. And I was even hired at I guess it was a Friends Hospital, dual diagnosed facility at one time as a janitor. I got hired there, and I worked there for 3 days. And then Human Resources called me into the office and told me, yeah, your criminal background check came back and we can't keep you here. And I argued and I said, hey, listen, you provide a facility for people coming off the streets to give them a second chance at life. You know, you help them get clean, you help them, you help them get clean, you help them, you know, get their life together and put them on the street. Well, I am one of them people. So give me a second chance. Please, just give me an opportunity and I'll prove myself. And he said, you sound really good and you're right, but all in all, this is a business and we can't keep you. So, you know, and I was very frustrated. I was telling a friend and a lawyer, a guy, he was a lawyer, and he knew me from like way 20 years ago, overheard my conversation about how I was frustrated with not getting a job and my criminal background check. And he said, he mentioned the expungement program, and which I had no idea what that was. And you know, he says, well, you know, you can get a job if you get an expungement. Come into my office and we'll talk more about it. So I went to his office. I was excited. So he sat and he told me all about expungement, but it's going to cost you $3,000. And I said, what? And I said, do you understand? I'm sitting in front of you with no job. How am I going to pay you $3,000 to help me out? That's ridiculous that I'm even sitting here. And so what happened was I was doing volunteer work around the city of Philadelphia. I would do that volunteer work to help occupy my time, and I came across the flyer of an expungement. And I called the number, and I got in touch with Zane Johnson here, and he invited me in and introduced me to volunteer lawyers that were doing expungements. And so, you know, I had no idea, and they printed out my criminal record. I could not believe it was 3 pages long, but it was. And so I was nervous, but they actually helped me, and you know, it took a little while, but it didn't take that long. But I said to Zane, you know, you're located in West Philadelphia. Your expungement. I live all the way in Northeast Philadelphia, which is, I have no bus fare, but I struggled to get here, and And why isn't this citywide? You should spread this more around the city. There's criminals trying to get, ex-offenders trying to get a second chance all over the city. The county jails are actually located in Northeast Philadelphia. You guys are out here in West Philadelphia. But so him and Mike Wells sat down with me, and we talked for a little while, and I winded up going to state representatives around different communities, just a few of them, to let them know, hey, expungement needs to be here. You know, we need to help people get second chances. You know, and so I don't know what, you know, next thing you know, I know there's one located now in Center City they're getting ready to have. I don't know if it's, but they're having a fair there for expungement. But it's just, I think second chances for ex-offenders. Everybody needs money in their pocket. Everybody, no matter who you are. And if you're an ex-offender coming out of jail and your criminal record is popping up on you, and you can't get a job, next thing you know, you're going to want money in your pocket. You're going to start hustling. Hustling leads to crime, and it leads you back in jail again. So it's just a constant cycle, because you can't get a job anyway because your criminal record keeps coming up. So hey, so what? Who cares? I'll sell drugs, or I'll steal stuff and sell it on the street, and that's what happens, and that's the reality. And then that's where no justice comes in criminal justice. There is no justice in it if you can't get a second chance. That's the way I feel about it.
Thank you so much, Tina. I appreciate that. So, Zane, I want to talk a little bit with you about one of the things a couple of things that Tina mentioned. One is the cost of the expungement process if you have to go to a private attorney, and so the role that your organization plays in ensuring that people don't have to come out of pocket with $3,000 to get their records expunged, and the ability for people around the state, Pennsylvania in particular, we find that in other states where there's a concentration in the areas where you have a larger population of people who might need the services, but then around the state there's not always those services available. So could you talk a little bit about the cost in Pennsylvania specifically, and then in terms of just trying to broaden your services to other areas, and how that's become a challenge for you guys, and how you've been able to maybe get around some of those challenges, because I know there are people listening in various jurisdictions that may be facing the same things that you guys are in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that there are so many people, not only in Pennsylvania, but across the nation, who are dealing with similar issues as far as the cost of these services, and then also the availability of these services in different areas. I think for folks in Philadelphia, it's nice that we have organizations like Community Legal Services, like ourselves, other organizations, kind of around the city, and I think that the services have come a long way. There are a lot of different organizations kind of providing these services now. As an organization, we're making a lot of efforts to move out into different areas of the city now, to kind of make those services available and really meet people where they're at. But I think that if you can't. Even for our organization, we can represent people up to 200% of the federal poverty line. But there are a lot of people who fall right above that, who still cannot afford a private attorney to represent them in this process.
So can you explain that just a little bit for those of us who don't know, when you say 200% above the poverty line?
Yeah, and so for our organization, we're a nonprofit legal aid organization, and we are able to file expungements on behalf of our clients and get all of the filing fees associated with those filings waived through an agreement with the court. But we can only represent people who, really fall within a certain level of the federal poverty line, which for us is 200%, and that kind of varies based on household size. But for a household of 4, I think it falls to right around, I think it's like $50,000, which obviously is not a lot. And so somebody who falls above that still obviously cannot afford to pay $3,000 for an attorney to file those expungements for them. That might mean, the difference between being able to pay rent or utilities or whatever the case may be. And then in addition to that, it's also really difficult for people in Pennsylvania, at least, because the filing fees are so high for expungements. Even to, be able to file an expungement pro se is costly as well, because each petition in Philadelphia, it's about $140 per petition to file an expungement. So if you've got 3 cases that all ended in non-convictions and you're looking to get them expunged, just the filing fee might be a barrier for folks. And so the cost is absolutely a major barrier for folks. The availability of services obviously is a major barrier as well. As I mentioned, in Philadelphia, there are a number of different service providers who are providing services around expungement and record sealing. But, as you head outside of Philadelphia County and across the state, there's a much smaller number of organizations who are playing that role. And because of that, they're having to make really difficult decisions about how they can use those resources. And so when you have, one attorney who's representing folks in 5 different counties around the state, it makes it very difficult for them to be able to really meet the need. And it's not just people in cities like Philadelphia who are dealing with criminal records and dealing with the barriers that come along with those and the stigma that comes along with that, but as folks in rural areas as well. And so I think of one client in particular who is having a lot of difficulty because she had a record in Philadelphia. We helped her get some of that cleared up, but there's still a little bit that's still left on there because it wasn't eligible for expungement. And she lives in a small town, and everyone knows that she has a record, and because of that, she can't find work within her town. And she moved up there to kind of get away from the city, to get away from a lot of that, and now she's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, figuring that, I could move back to the city and all of the drama that brings for me and be able to find employment, or, do I stay out here and deal with the drama that comes with being in a small town where everyone knows you have a record and the stigma that comes along with that. And so, I think it's really important for advocates to really understand that record sealing, expungement, all of that is very, very important, but that there's other ways to attack and really help people overcome these barriers as well that don't necessarily involve or don't require the person who's being discriminated against to take the step in making sure that they're not being discriminated against. And I think, what Tina said, in talking about her experiences really highlights what I mean by that, because, a lot of times we don't take the time to think about how backwards that might seem to tell someone who, you're being discriminated against because you have a criminal record, and we know that discrimination is not right, or we don't agree with that, but we're going to put the onus on you to take the steps to overcome the discrimination that you're facing. When, there are other things that we can do, such as helping to pass ban-the-box laws, which in Philadelphia we fortunately have, but, passing laws like ban-the-box, limiting the way in which criminal history record information is disseminated, which Clean Slate is really doing through the automated sealing of non-conviction information, and again, also addressing the stigma that people have around criminal history record information, because that's what really creates the need for expungement in the first place, is the fact that there is this stigma, is the fact that this information is so freely disseminated. And if you address a lot of that, you create a situation in a society where people can actually find a second chance without having to worry about being judged every time they step in for a job interview.
Thank you. Very good analysis there in terms of just how they move forward and how they're able to move forward, and the barriers that are put in place, regardless of what you've already done in your past. You've served your time. You should not be discriminated against because you have this record, and we know that it's happening around the country, and in particular here in Pennsylvania, where the law changed. The law changed, but not for all types of offenses, correct, Sharon? So you're dealing with that issue as well, that there are other offenses that this legislation does not touch. I know it's estimated that 31 million cases will be sealed, but what about all those other cases? So can you talk a little bit about the cases, the types of offenses that will be sealed, and are there next steps to maybe move the needle forward a little bit in terms of other offenses that aren't part of this legislation?
Of actual convictions that can be sealed, they're only unfortunately, the most modest. As I said, misdemeanors, most misdemeanors, but not all, after 10 years. And summary offenses will be automatically sealed after 10 years. Now, you can actually have those expunged by a petition after 5. So clean slate is kind of like a extra security blanket for that. But obviously what I did not mention is felony records. And Pennsylvania actually is far behind a lot of other states that do allow at least some felonies to be sealed or expunged. In fact, that's a growing trend around the country and a very welcome one. I frankly still feel like it's something of a miracle that we managed to pass clean slate in Pennsylvania, given that we do not have a huge tradition of expunging cases. We only recently got into sealing of misdemeanors. That was only 2016 that we moved into that area. But it does give me hope, especially in the larger national context of states all over the country, in every region, red or blue, all moving to expand their expungement and sealing laws. And I see that what we did in Pennsylvania as just another step on the path to making a more robust remedy so that, for instance, people with drug felonies, often people with drug felonies in Pennsylvania were not holding that much by way of product when they were arrested, but it doesn't take much to get a drug felony, and many of our clients have very old drug felonies and have nothing since then, and some of them were addicted at the time and aren't now. And I think that that's the next step in Pennsylvania, is that we'll start seeing at least nonviolent felonies and especially drug felonies also sealed. If I were to predict what the legislature will do next, I think that's it.
So in terms of the what Zane mentioned, the 140 per petition, those people who are receiving now the automatic sealing on the particular misdemeanors that fall under that category, let's say they had 5 misdemeanors on their record, that would have been 5 times 140. So
That's
now
correct.
Basically what you're doing is you're putting it all in one box, and you're hoping that they
No
press
cost.
that button
No
and
cost,
the technology
yes.
works,
Yes.
and that all those records are then sealed.
And you also don't have to find a lawyer.
Find a lawyer to do it.
So, and you don't even need to know that you're eligible. Many people start with the misconception that because it's been so long,
It's dropped off.
Correct. There's a legend that, 7 years has gone by and it's gone. And unfortunately, absolutely the opposite is true. Criminal records tend to be for life, unless there's a sealing or expungement remedy to eliminate them. And that includes the non-convictions, the cases like Gary's that you're found not guilty. If you don't take an affirmative action in the absence of something like clean slate, which is still new. Utah now passed a clean slate bill in March. That's now the second state in the union that has automated sealing going into place. We're hoping that a lot of other places do the same. But for now, you need to find a lawyer, you need to pay a fee, you need a filing fee, you need to pay your fines and costs in the case. There's quite a lot involved to getting your record clear.
Yeah. So in terms of you just looking at what you're going to try to do going forward with the drug convictions, a lot of states are dealing with that, in particular the marijuana issue, because so many states have legalized marijuana or small amounts of marijuana, or there's the medical marijuana. What is that looking like for you guys in Pennsylvania? Are the drug offenses, do you think, are they marijuana? Are they like cocaine? Are they heroin? What are the types of offenses that you're seeing there?
They can really be any of those. And bear in mind, we've had these different periods of societal addiction problems, really. I mean, you can look back to the 1990s and the crack epidemic and see a foreshadowing of now with the opioid epidemic. And so I think that's part of the reason why policymakers are finally understanding that we need to do something across the board to allow people with drug convictions, which after all typically are not hurting other people, they're hurting yourself. And when people have done what they need to overcome addiction, that is so miraculous to start with. You would think people would be rewarded for having overcome something so powerful. But instead, they're stuck in this pattern where they're different people, but the record's still the same.
Right. So I want to let people who are watching know that they can ask a question at advocacynetwork@nacdl.org if you would like to ask a question. Again, advocacynetwork@nacdl.org. I want to pose the next question to both Gary and Tina. I don't have a criminal conviction. I don't think I've ever been arrested, maybe close, because I was protesting, but that's another issue. I think it's very brave to have someone come forward who has had the experience and talk about it really openly. And I'm just curious as to your path in terms of thinking about, you've had this conviction, you've been part of the system, and now you're here and you're doing, well, you're working and your life is on track. How do you respond to people who might think that you shouldn't have gotten a second chance, or that people are shocked when they hear that you've, had this criminal background? How do you make, how do you come to terms with that for yourself and for other people, and how do you explain that to other people? And the fact that you're here being very brave, we are very, very pleased that you agreed to come in and do this. And so could you talk a little bit about that?
You want to go first? Well, from my perspective, and I'm gonna tell you a little situation that happened when I went into Sharon's office, when I decided to retire from community legal service, after like 26 years.
Most people retire and just retire. You retired and you moved to D.C. and started dropping.
I wanted to do different things. I did that for so long, and I went through different phases of legal services, and legal services is a tough, situation to keep going, financially, funding-wise, There's always funding challenges. So anyway, when I went into Sharon's office and I spoke to her, about I want to try to get this stuff off of my record. I'm out here trying to find jobs, new opportunities, and I'm not getting any results, and I'm really feeling bad about this whole process, and I'm getting pretty irritated and probably negative. You know what I mean? And and Sharon said, "Well, don't worry about it. I'll help you." And she was right in there, helping. And she said, "I'll get a copy of your criminal record, and then I'll call you in. We'll talk." So then, once she got the record, I came in and I sat down, and she said, "Wow, Gary, I didn't know none of this." And at that point, we have been working. I remember when Sharon first came to Community Legal Service. Like, I don't know what year it was, but it was a long time ago. You know what I mean? And she was working in the employment unit with Harold Goodman and Claudia and Andy Erba and So anyway, she said, "Wow, I didn't know none of this. Like, this is serious. So I said, "Yeah. I've been through a lot. I've been through a lot. Getting the opportunity to work at Community Legal Service, it gave me a education in terms of the legal system, and criminally and civilly at the same time, because I had access to a law library. I had access to all kinds of different programs where you could look up cases, and I was helping other people. They was calling me because I worked there. I was reaching out to other attorneys, about what does a person do if this happens or that happens. So anyway, having that opportunity really allowed me to put some positive energy into the negative things that happened to me in my life. And so you know, when I talk to people, and you know, even when I meet people in public, you know, even with my employment, you know, in my employment situation or whatever, you know, I talk to people, you know, you see the same people every day, you know what I mean? You know, sometimes they talk to you about different things, you know, I mean, you try to give, you know, positive input, or, you know, you try to give positive advice, or, you know, constructive input. And I always draw on the things that I went through in my life in order to help other people. And so it's not, to me, I own who I am. I own, you know, the fact that, you know, I went through these things in life. You know, part of that process when I was going through it, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew a lot, but I really didn't get intelligent until I realized how much I didn't know. So it's a situation where I embrace the things that happened to me, and I try to maybe turn it into something positive by helping somebody else. So, you know, I mean, I really try to transform, you know, that kind of energy into something positive and constructive. I mean, it's no shame, it's no, you know, it's regret. You know, because I see the potential of how good life can be. And, you know, I'm living a good life. And I just wish I was living that good life a long time ago. And I wish I didn't go down the path that I went down. And like I said, you know, expungement, you know, gave me a new life. I mean, without that, I really couldn't tell you what would have happened to me. I mean, I could probably tell you that it wouldn't have been good. So yeah.
I appreciate you saying that you own it. I mean,
No, I own it. I own it.
where we've been, where we're going.
Absolutely.
And so I thank you very much for that. And Tina.
What was the question again? No, I'm kidding. No, I want to say, I would want to say to people, you know, I stand strong when it comes to people getting second chances. Well, no matter what it is, if it's a crime, if it's drugs, if it's anything, we all need a second chance. You know, there's people in society, in the community, who look down on people who have committed crimes, who have done drugs, and why do they deserve second chances? You know, just let them rot. Just let them rot. And you know, we all in life, you know, have done something wrong, have done something that we regret. You know, like Gary said, I own what I did. I am not ashamed of what I did. I did what I did. I can't change it. That is part of my past. You know, at 45, I grew up and wanted to start my life over with three kids, three grown kids. And, you know, there are so many homeless people out there on the street that I work with. That is my job. I work with, but I do it because I like it. And a lot of them are homeless because they can't get a second chance. And I work with a lot of drug addicts, and I work with a lot of mental illness. That's what I do for a living. I wanted to be the person on the other side of the desk reaching my hand out and treat people the way I would want to be treated. You know, I enforced the expungement program on many people, and people do not pay attention. In my desk at work, I have expungement flyers. Zane sends me them email. I print them out. I give them out to my company. Nobody really pays attention to it. I've been to state representatives' offices, trying to enforce the expungement program. That sounds good, they say, but nobody pays attention to it. You know, it's not a big thing, you know, but they complain about homeless people on the street, about the drug addicts running around stealing to eat, stealing to sell, stealing to hustle money, because they can't get a second chance, and the jails are overcrowded with minor crimes, people that can't get second chances. I hear people say, well, you know, in the wintertime, I'll just go back to jail. Yeah, I'll just get locked up. You know, I got a criminal background anyway, so I can't get a job. I've done it. I've said it. You said about people think 7 years go by and the record's clean. That's not true. I still have something from 1989 in Bucks County, you know, that's on my record, and I've had stuff in the 90s that was on my record that I thought was wiped clean too, but it didn't work like that. You know, people want to grow up at some time. I think if the expungement program was more enforced within society, within this country, that people, hey, you can get a second chance. You can clean up your record. You can go to a drug program, you know, and really get your life together. I did it. I was homeless at one time. Not at one time, at many times. I was a homeless person, and I did what I had to do. And that's why I got a record, because I stole a lot. I winded up in jails, and I winded up in institutions. I was a shoplifter, and I did other things that I'm not going to mention at this moment. But I did what I had to do to stay alive, or, you know, and I always got locked up. You know, 45 years old, you know, people would look at me like, no, you know, you think you're going to do what you do and get a second chance? You don't deserve a second chance. You know, you should rot. Well, you know what? I put my hand out to people today. I shake their hand and I introduce myself. You know, and the people who I share my story with will say, you don't look like a person that was ever in jail. Well, I was. And I was there many a times, and I did many bad things. But I turned my life around. I work in the community, and it's something that I never thought that I could be who I am today. I never thought that. You know, and I still want to go forward with myself. I'm still trying to enhance my life to be a better person, to help more people. I'm 49 now, so you know, life goes on for me, and I'm always calling Zane like, I have this guy here who wants his record. Yeah, can you help him out with an expungement? You know, because when I mention it, some people will say, oh, you got to hook me up with that, but nobody does it. State representatives don't want to hear it. Councilmen don't want to hear it. They always say it's a good thing, but nobody really pays attention to it. It's not paid attention to.
It's not sexy. It's not glamorous.
Yeah, it's not paid attention to. Which, if I think, can I just say this? If society, the upper hand, paid attention more to expungements, instead of, I'm not going to say, if they paid attention more to expungement, this expungement program, and really put it out there, I promise you, the jails will not be so overcrowded, and people will really start getting their life together. I promise you, I did it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. It needs to be enforced more. It needs to be heard more. You don't ever hear about expungement. I didn't hear about it. I saw a flyer. That's how I heard about it. Just laying there. I picked it up. Oh, that's what the lawyer told me. Let me go check it out. How do I get bus fare to get there? I don't have a job. Spread it throughout the city. That's all.
Well, we appreciate all the work that you're doing getting other people. Calling Zane. Zane, calling
help
Zane
me
too.
out.
I have a
This
couple
guy
of
has a
Zane.
record.
He has a record. He needs it clean. So, Zane, let me ask you. This morning, my husband Michael and I are big news junkies. Him more so than me. But we were listening to some of the presidential candidates, and they were talking about should people be allowed to vote if they're in jail? And I was like, you mean prison? Because when you're in jail, some jails you're able to vote, but that's technicality. And they were saying that, some people are like, no, they shouldn't be allowed to vote if they have a conviction on their record. And I'm not asking you whether or not you think that's right or wrong, but what would you say to them in terms of getting them to maybe think about things maybe a little bit differently, about people being able to vote if they have a conviction on their record, people who were incarcerated being able to vote. No one said anything about the 2 jurisdictions where people are incarcerated in prisons and they can vote now. No one asked that question in Maine and Vermont, and we probably know why, but what would you say to the presidential candidates if they were sitting there in front of you? So
I think, and I wonder if you didn't ask me what I thought because you kind of already knew. But yeah, I think, I think what I would really say is I think it's important for people to realize that across the United States, it's estimated that somewhere between like 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 folks actually has a criminal record and a criminal background, which means that if you don't have a record, you have a family member who does, you have a friend who does, you have a coworker who does, you have someone who you smile to on the bus who does. There's someone who you know and who you care about and who you look at and say, that's a good person, that's someone who I would want to live in my neighborhood or coach my kids' basketball team or, go on a field trip, and chaperone the field trip. And so it's important for people to realize, and again, it kind of goes back to addressing that stigma that there are so many people who have a criminal record, a criminal history record, and that criminal history is not personal history. What's on your criminal history record doesn't represent who you are as a person. It represents a snapshot in time, and what it really tells you about someone is the actions that the criminal justice system has chosen to take against that person. So when you look at a criminal history record, you can't even really tell what happened in that situation without actually talking to that person and getting a chance to look at them as a full human being rather than boiling down their life to what is in between the 4 corners of a criminal history record. And so I think that at the end of the day, that's kind of what I would say is that it's important that we're looking at people and taking people as whole people and not judging them based off of face value from a criminal history record. I think the other thing, too, around the issue of voting and criminal records as well, and it goes back to what's been mentioned, I think, a number of times, is the misinformation that's out there. And so in Pennsylvania, for example, if you have a criminal record, you're allowed to vote regardless of what convictions you have. Actually, the only situation in which you're prohibited from voting in relation to contact with the criminal justice system is if you're currently incarcerated serving a felony sentence. And so a lot of people think that they're not allowed to vote because they have a conviction or because they have a felony conviction, and that's not actually the case. And so it's important, it's just as important, as the services that organizations like ours provide, is spreading the information so that people understand what their rights are, and so that people really understand, what having a criminal record means for them and what it doesn't mean. Because the services, it's one thing, as far as what we can do as advocates in providing services is, helping to remove some of those barriers for folks. But at the end of the day, the other half of that is giving folks the information that they need to be able to move forward and really take advantage of all the opportunities that may open up for them as a result of an expungement or whatever the case may be. So making sure that people are aware of the rights that they have when they're searching for employment and a criminal record pops up. Making sure that people are aware of the rights that they have when it comes to voting, because that's so important. We send people to our state capitals to be able to represent the needs of the community with so many people dealing with criminal records and needing a remedy to be able to overcome those barriers. It's important that we actually come back with something that allows people to actually bounce back from that. But I also wanted to say one quick thing in regards to what is also being done, because from the perspective of clean slate and what we're allowed to help people get expunged in Pennsylvania, it's still pretty limited for folks, and so there's a lot that we can help get removed for folks. But when it comes to a conviction, a felony conviction in particular, the only options that someone has to actually get that expunged from their record right now is to wait until you turn 70, wait until you've been dead for 3 years, which is actually on the books, is actually within the statute.
Which I thought was absolutely incredible.
It's
You
crazy.
get it expunged 3 years after you have left this land.
And not even after you've passed on, but
Right.
you got to wait until you're cold in the ground before you get that opportunity. And so, for most people, the best avenue to actually get a conviction removed from their record, and I mean like fully removed, expunged from their record, is through the pardon process. But saying that that's the best avenue is somewhat of an oxymoron, because it's a process that in Pennsylvania and in many states across the country, it's like if you tell someone, you should apply for a pardon, it's like, well, I might as well apply to be an astronaut at the same time, because probably got as good a chance of walking on the moon as getting a pardon. And so that's something that, for us as an organization, we're working to try to change that and change that attitude, and try to make the pardon process another tool or another avenue that people can use to be able to overcome conviction information that's on their record that's years and years old. And so when someone has moved on, really trying to find ways that we allow them to move forward and that we don't stand in the way of their progress. And so that's something else that we're doing along those lines, is really looking at the pardon process, how we can advocate for changes within that process to make it more accessible to folks, but then also how we can, create a network of services around actually helping people to access that process.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask you, Sharon, this question, because I think a lot of people around the country want to know. You were able to get, bipartisanship with the legislation, which is always huge. It's always a huge feat to get both sides talking. You got Koch Industries involved, and they've been involved in criminal justice reform for a while. You got the NFL players, and they were very active with the juvenile justice issue as well in Pennsylvania. But you got the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association. So could you talk to folks a little bit about building those coalitions to get legislation, get it in a state where people can agree to disagree, but agree on at least this base, like this, we have to at least do this for people. So could you talk a little bit about just that coalition building and getting people from both sides talking?
Thanks, I'd love to do that. One of the most important things that happened in our campaign was that the Justice Action Network out of DC, consisting of national advocacy groups on both the left and the right, came to Pennsylvania to support Clean Slate. And when I'd worked on expungement bills in the past, we generally were liberal, left-oriented groups, or perceived that way, and it got the kind of partisan attention you might expect. But when Jan came in, and they had conservative members of their organization, such as Freedom Works, Americans for Tax Reform, they were able to get different support from the jump. And so our lead sponsor was Senator Scott Wagner, who at that point was seen as one of the most prominent conservatives in the Pennsylvania legislature, and who later ran for governor against the incumbent Democrat Tom Wolf just this past year. When Senator Wagner signed on, he brought the imprimatur of conservatives, of employers, and it really took off from there. And one group you did not mention that was critical in our campaign was the Chamber, and in particular the Pennsylvania Chamber, chambers of the cities of Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. the chambers around the country more and more have been supporting expansion of expungement and sealing legislation because they say that they need workers in this tight labor market, and there's a shortage, and this will help create a new pool of folk for them to hire. Now, many of us would say, what? They're the same people. Tina and Gary are the same people, whether or not they have their record expunged. But the truth is that if that is going to get the employer community to support expungement like they have successfully in Kentucky and South Carolina, that is extremely useful. And so the employer community has been very helpful and it was involved in the passage of Clean Slate in Utah. And the district attorneys associations also are starting to realize that they don't want to be left out. Now, the Pennsylvania DAs Association had a lot to do with how our bill ultimately became law in terms of narrowing it from where I would have preferred to see it be. But once they got to what they thought was a necessary change, they realized they didn't want to be the only people that weren't supporting this bill. Mm-hmm. And so when we got to the end of the process, everyone supported the bill. Everyone. Only 2 people in Pennsylvania voted against it in the legislature. And at our press conference before the bill was passed, the PA DAs Association was there along with everybody else. That has created a level of buy-in that gives me hope that we can continue to do bipartisan work together. In fact, this year we're working with the same coalition on a bill to reform occupational licensing. And so I hope it's a model that can be used across the country. And states across the country are looking at the Clean Slate model. They are looking at bipartisan coalition. Hopefully we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, I hope so too. I know that, thank you for mentioning, I live in Delaware, and you mentioned there's a clean slate bill that's going to be introduced, hopefully. And I know Safe and Just Michigan has been working in Michigan to
Yes.
try to expand their expungement there, as well as other jurisdictions. So I'm sure your phone is probably pretty busy, or was pretty busy when you first passed this, because you're like, how did you do this in Pennsylvania? So appreciate all of the efforts, because it was quite a feat. So I'm going to ask everyone to just summarize where we are, where you think we should go, and tell us anything that you think you haven't already mentioned in this webinar. He's deferring to you, Tina.
You want to go first? I go first. You want to go first?
You go first.
All right. I feel as though one of the things that we haven't really touched on is the effect of these laws not being passed and how it affects the people who are connected to those people. And we talking about children, we talking about brothers and sisters, we talking about community members, we talking about everybody that these people touch, and how they're affected by the things that happen in their life. And I just believe that if I wouldn't have went through the process that I went through, and if I wouldn't have, got my life together, if expungement wasn't available to me, I just feel as though there are so many people who wouldn't have benefited from me being the person that I am today. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's important. Everybody counts. Everybody plays a part. I mean, everybody's important. And I just feel as though we just need to recognize that we all sometimes need support. And, in order for us to do things in life, we have to have community. And, we none of us have gotten where we are by ourselves. And, the people around us and the people who have influenced us and, in a positive way and the people who have touched us and continue to touch us, even though they may not still be here, but they touch us in terms of the way that they were in our lives. So I just feel as though, expungement can be a thing that not only benefits the individual, it can benefit the masses. And the more that is contributed to this area, I think that it will benefit us as a country, as a people. And I want to do everything I can before I leave here to try to make sure that happens, and to see if I can reach some of the youth that may be where I was, and maybe I can give them some insight, and maybe I can say something to them. Maybe I can tell them my story. Maybe they'll believe it when it comes from me because I lived it. And I would really like to see that happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Tina.
And everything Gary said. No, he's right on point, and that's how I feel. I feel, for me, when I got my record expunged, I was so excited. I felt like I had a clean start, and I don't want to mess that up. I don't want to get involved in anything. I remember stealing at a Wawa. I don't know if you guys know what a Wawa is. I don't know if they have one. They would have Tootsie Rolls and Hubba Bubba gums. I would take one of them. And that's shoplifting. That's stealing. I never got caught doing that, but I don't even take them anymore because I just want to be honest in all I do. Everything I do, I just want to be like a true, honest person today. Like Gary said, there are brothers, sisters, daughters, sons, family, just all around us. I actually get called mom today. I didn't get called mom before. I got called names because of who I was. My kids have so much respect for me today because of who I am. Excuse me, I just look at life on a whole different perspective. And, I felt like such a loser at one time, but today life to me is just on a whole new perspective. I don't worry about who's looking at me anymore or what they think of me. I just walk through society, and I feel as though my perspective of life is we all are shoulder to shoulder, no matter who you are, what race you are, of what you've done in life. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, no matter what it is. We all deserve second chances. They say it, when you're young, you're dumb. I thought I knew it all at one time. I thought I knew what I was doing. Nobody could tell me anything, but I wish I listened, because, I kind of messed up things. But you know what? Like Gary said, I could tell my story to somebody who will actually maybe believe me because I lived it. Don't get involved in that. Don't do that. And that's what I actually do for a living. Some listen, some don't, but, never be ashamed of your story.
You're doing the work.
Yes.
You're doing the work.
I
So I appreciate that. So in the few minutes we have left, like a minute.
Oh, I'm
could you just-
sorry.
That's okay. It's okay.
Yikes.
Just how can people get involved, in touch with you, your organization, and maybe when your next clinic is?
Yeah, so again, I'm with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. Should I give out the phone number?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll just
If you want to give out your cell number? Or
No, I'm not my cell. No. I barely answer the phone anyway, so. But yeah, so you can get in touch with us at 267-519-5323. Our website is plscphilly.org. Our next upcoming clinic is going to be on May 2nd in Philadelphia, and we're going to have a couple clinics probably in June as well, and we're always available to come out and give out information about criminal record clearing and the options available to folks. So feel free to reach out, any questions whatsoever.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, 267-519-5323. And the website is plscphilly, philly.org.
Sharon?
If you want to know more about Clean Slate in Pennsylvania, go to mycleanslateba.com. And you'll also find links there to other national campaigns if you'd like to bring Clean Slate to your state. If you want to talk with me about expungement, you can reach me at 215-981-3700. Even better, email me at sdietrich, Dietrich, at clsphila.org. Thanks very much.
So if you want more information about programming that NACDL has here, you can go to Advocacy Network at nacdl.org or nacdl.org. And for information about NNJ, you can email us at info@National Network for Justice. That's all spelled out, National Network for Justice. UFCW is ufcw.org. I want to thank the panel so much for being here. I know this seemed Pennsylvania focused, but we have at least one person here who's in DC now. And I really want to thank you all for your expertise and your experiences, because I think the more information that we have, the better off we will all be. The more educated we are about these issues, the better off we will be as a society. So thank you all very much. Thank you all for watching and listening, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.